Welcome back to What Matters This Week. I'm Lauren Maloney. Joining us now is Dr. Don Levy. He is the director of the Siena College Research Institute, just capping off a special Earth Day poll. Dr. Levy, appreciate you being here.
Great to be with you.
There's a lot in this, but first of all, we should mention it is the 51st anniversary of Earth Day. You and I are speaking on Earth Day itself. But you wanted this poll to come out last year. It was delayed because of the pandemic. Why was it still important that you put this out?
Well, I think we're trying to celebrate what was the 50th here on the 51st. And many of us wondered, how far have we come? 50 or 51 years is a long time. To what degree now are New Yorkers concerned about various environmental issues? To what degree are we recycling, conserving? And at this point, are we willing to support the initiatives that are going to protect our environment? And do we think that we can handle this economically? So these were all questions a year ago, and they're questions that are vital to us today.
The majority of New Yorkers, according to your survey here, very concerned with water pollution, air pollution, deforestation, and climate change. What surprised you with some of these?
Well, what surprised me, when we ask a poll question like that, we ask you, are you very concerned, somewhat, not very, or not at all? And so oftentimes, people don't flock to that extreme position, the one of very concerned. But what surprised me is that we saw those very large majorities who didn't just say they were somewhat concerned, they said they are very concerned. So over 60% being very concerned with water pollution, air pollution. Deforestation surprised me a little bit, maybe a little bit more of an issue in some parts of New York than other, but still across the board, very concerned. And climate change. As we know, climate change has been sort of a politicized term, but still, well over 50% say, I am very concerned with that. I was surprised at the degree of concern being that widespread across New Yorkers of virtually every political stripe, every region, every age.
So what does that tell you then? How do we look into these numbers?
Well, what it tells us, and we asked the question towards the end, and we said, are you more inclined to say that we've sort of reached the point of no concern, of no return, and we've got to take action? Or do you think we're doing as much as we can? And there again, a large majority, 58%, said, I think we have to take action now, or else we're going to do irreparable damage to our planet. So I think if we could go back in time to 51 years ago, I think folks would be surprised that these very large majorities of everyday New Yorkers are saying, we've got to do something to protect our environment, or it could be too late.
You also noted, Doctor, that New Yorkers by over 2 to 1 believe policies designed to protect the environment are more likely to help rather than hurt the economy. And we're coming off, a year, in a pandemic where, of course, the economy was hit quite a bit. So what about these numbers here? What can we look into these?
Well, again, those numbers are politicized. Amongst our Republican respondents, they did not feel that. Republican respondents tended to believe that widespread initiatives, environmental initiatives, could hurt the economy. But again, we are in New York, and so there are about 2 Democrats for every 1 Republican. But the independents as well flock to that position that taking initiative on things like electric cars, zero emissions electricity production, will ultimately, they believe, a strong majority saying will help the economy. So there is an underlying belief that some of these policies and initiatives will create jobs, good jobs for New Yorkers, and simultaneously protect our environment for us, our kids, and our grandkids.
That said, do you think the Democratic and Republican responses were expected?
Yeah, I think so. I think because many of these things, as I've mentioned, are politicized. There is a tendency among some of the Republican respondents to say, I'm for clean water, I'm for clean air. We're doing as much as we can, but we can't go overboard because we've got to pay for these things. We didn't ask specifically, for example, about the Green New Deal. We asked, about some of the policies within it. So I think that New Yorkers are saying we want to protect the environment. We want to do it in a prudent way that generates good jobs, and they see that as being helpful to themselves, the environment, and the economy.
Again, you and I are speaking on Earth Day itself. Earlier today, President Biden announced, he wants the U.S. to aim to cut carbon emissions in half by the year 2030. Does that jive with the results of your survey?
Yeah, it certainly does. I mean, we asked that question slightly differently here in New York, whether or not people are in favor of New York achieving production of electricity with zero emissions by 2040. That is the approach that we're taking here in the state of New York. And there was overwhelming support for that. Again, I think that's an issue that people say, I want my electricity to work, but we have to do it in a responsible way. And still, it seems as though 2040 is a long way off. That gives us time. Somehow, 2030 is a little bit more of a difficult bar. But still, New Yorkers are saying, I think we can do that. We've achieved great things in the past. And I think that, to bring it back to politics for a second, that's an issue that, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, there is a certain sense of pride in feeling as New Yorkers, we can achieve something difficult like that. We can produce electricity through ways that don't emit the emissions that would damage the environment. And we can create jobs at the same time as doing it. So certainly, I think that the Biden administration position resonates with the position of the Cuomo administration and the state of New York and the people of New York in general.
New York's plastic bag ban went into effect last year, wasn't really enforced until November because of the pandemic as well. Those results, when it came to issues like single-use plastics, do you find that because that's a tangible thing to do, picking up the reusable bag instead of plastic, has a higher favorability rate when it comes to polls like this because it's something people can easily do and see the return on?
Yeah, I think so. And I think that pointing out that it was a ban gives it that structural support. Because we asked about a series of behaviors. Do you conserve? Do you remember before you leave home to shut the lights off? Do you remember to turn down the thermostat? Do you conserve water? And although people tend to do those, they do those at a rate far less than people say that they either use reusable bags or recycle. In both of those initiatives, recycling, perhaps you have a separate bin that you can put your recyclables in. And there has been a structural push to encourage New Yorkers to take part in that. And certainly we saw that, 69% of New Yorkers say that they use reusable bags very often. Another 23% said sometimes. So we've adjusted to that. I remember initially when the ban was being proposed, people were, oh my God, what am I going to do? And little bit by little bit, we've adjusted. And I think that it's borne out in the numbers. And again, if you look at that, by party, even, plastic bags were a partisan issue to some extent here in New York when that was being debated. Right now, 70% of Democrats say they very often use reusable bags. 70% of Republicans say the very same thing. So, putting that ban, that law, that process in place has ultimately changed behavior. We haven't seen the same degree of behavior change on some of the conservation issues, which as yet don't have any sort of structural support for it.
And why is that? Do you think it's a comfort thing? We like our hot water for the shower, or we like the lights on at a certain time of day.
Well, I think that we are an affluent society, and one of the pictures of affluence is that we get to turn the lights on when and where we want. We get to have as many things on in the house as we want, and if you're fortunate enough not to be affected that much by whether that bill is slightly higher at the end of the month, the usage fee is only, as you know, really a relatively small percentage of your utility bill. So we haven't been driven to be as conservation-minded when it comes to shutting off the lights. I'll say I'm guilty of that. And, I'm sometimes reminded to turn a light off when I leave the room. But that's something that hopefully we don't come to the point as New Yorkers, as Americans, where that is something that we need to do in order to protect ourselves.
While parts of New York State are more conducive to public transportation than others, and in the North Country here, we don't see that as much, of course, were you surprised that that category about, alternative forms of transportation wasn't as high as some of the others?
I really wasn't. I mean, we just simply don't have a system that accommodates all New Yorkers. And you've got to recognize that this is a survey that certainly included our friends in New York City who use public transportation far more than some places. But we're also interviewing people in the North Country, in Western New York, in Long Island, where it's simply not sufficiently convenient for all people to rely on public transportation or to say, I'm going to ride my bike. That's not conducive to everyone. We did see, for example, though, when we asked people whether they were in favor of redesigning our cities to be more pedestrian friendly, there we saw tremendous support. So, whether you're living in Plattsburgh or you're living in Albany or you're living in New York City, there was strong majority support to make our cities more pedestrian friendly, to have bike lanes, to have the ability for pedestrians to safely enjoy cities. And New York City especially, that is something that did extremely well. 52% of New York City residents strongly support that. So we may, on your next trip in to New York City, you may see a gradual development of a more pedestrian-friendly environment, even in the largest city in the world.
Finally, Dr. Levy, what were some of the concerns that this country faced 51 years ago when Earth Day was first celebrated? I imagine much differently than today.
Well, certainly, and I'm glad you point out that I'm old enough to remember that. But at that point in time, there was a sense that people just simply did not understand. I'll take one common behavior that people used to be engaged in. People would change the oil in their vehicle and walk out to the field behind their house and dump the oil. So there was a total lack of awareness that some of the behaviors that we were engaged in terms of waste disposal, in terms of the impact on clean water, clean air, we just were totally ignorant of the impact that we as Americans, as New Yorkers, as consumers were having on the planet. We just simply thought that it would be, the way it is forever. It was limitless. And so gradually now, over these 51 years, we've learned the damage, the threat that we potentially pose to the planet and to ourselves. We've become educated, and we've taken steps. We've produced businesses that benefit from environmental policies. And still, it's not as if there isn't resistance, there isn't concern. But I think gradually, certainly now with several generations of being educated on the effect that we as human beings have on our environment, that we've changed. And we have a ways to go. And I'm excited. I'm excited to see more pro-environmental policies lead to businesses that generate quality of life products and do that safely and responsibly.
Dr. Don Levy from the Siena College Research Institute, thank you so much for joining us.